My sister thought ramming her rusted minivan into my $8 million custom iron gate would force me to pay attention to her. She was right. But she did not know that the high-definition security camera recording her meltdown was not just capturing a crime. It was capturing the final piece of evidence I needed to foreclose on her entire life. My name is Dominique, and at 32 years old, I own the largest medical logistics company in Atlanta. 10 years ago, my family threw me out on the street with a trash bag of clothes because I refused to fund my sister's wedding. Today, they are at my doorstep screaming for mercy, but they are about to learn that the only thing I serve is justice. Before I tell you how I dismantled their entitlement piece by piece, please hit the like button and subscribe if you have ever had to build your own castle after your family locked you out of theirs. The sound of metal screeching against metal shattered the silence of my Saturday afternoon. It was a violent grinding noise that made the crystal glass in my hand vibrate. I watched as a dark stain of vintage Chateau Margaux wine spilled onto my cream-colored Persian rug. A rug that cost $12,000 ruined in a second. But I did not move to clean it up. My eyes were locked on the security monitor mounted on the wall of my home office. My heart should have been racing, I should have been panicked. But as I set the wine glass down on the marble coaster, I felt a cold calm wash over me. I reached for my phone, which had been vibrating incessantly for the last hour. The screen lit up with a notification that made my stomach turn. 109 missed calls, 42 from Mom, 25 from Dad, and 40 from my sister Latoya, plus 2 from a number I did not recognize but I assumed belonged to the man currently trying to destroy my property. I tapped the screen of my iPad, bringing up the live feed from the front gate. The image was crystal clear in 4K resolution. A beat-up Honda Odyssey with a missing hubcap and a bumper held on by duct tape was wedged against the intricate ironwork of my front entrance. Steam was hissing from the radiator. And there he was. Gavin, my brother-in-law, the man my parents had chosen over me. He looked exactly as I remembered him, only older and more worn down by years of bad decisions. He was slamming his hand against the steering wheel, screaming something I could not hear yet. Beside him in the passenger seat was Latoya, my golden child sister. She looked frantic, her face contorted in a mask of rage and desperation. And in the back seat I could see the silhouettes of my parents. I pressed the button to activate the two-way intercom system. My voice filled the cabin of their car, amplified by the hidden speakers in the stone pillars. "This is private property," I said, my tone flat and professional. "You have exactly 2 minutes to reverse your vehicle and leave before I authorize the use of force." The reaction was immediate. Gavin jumped out of the car. He was wearing a stained t-shirt that was too tight around his midsection. He marched up to the camera lens, his face turning a shade of red that suggested high blood pressure. "Open the damn gate, Dominique," he shouted, spitting as he spoke. "I know you are in there. I can see that fancy Bentley parked by the fountain. You think you are too good for us now, is that it?" I watched him on the screen, feeling a strange sense of detachment. He looked at my home not with awe but with a hungry greed. His eyes darted past the gate, taking in the manicured lawn, the 3-tier fountain, and the limestone facade of the main house. He was calculating. I could practically see the dollar signs spinning in his eyes. Latoya scrambled out of the passenger side. She rushed to the intercom, her voice shrill and piercing. "Dominique, please, you have to open the gate. It is Dad. He is having a heart attack. You have to let us in. We need help." I zoomed the camera in on the back seat of the van. My father Desmond was clutching his chest, his head thrown back against the headrest. My mother Betty was fanning him frantically with a folded-up newspaper. It was a compelling performance. If I did not know them, I might have called 911 immediately. But I knew them. I knew that my father used his heart condition as a get-out-of-jail-free card whenever he was backed into a corner. He had a heart attack when I wanted to go to college instead of working at the family shop. He had a heart attack when I refused to sign over my savings for Latoya's honeymoon. I picked up my phone, but I did not dial the police. The last thing I needed was a squad car with flashing lights attracting the attention of my neighbors. In Buckhead, reputation is currency, and I would not let my family devalue mine. Instead, I dialed the direct line for Blackwood Security, the private firm that patrolled our gated community. "I have an intrusion at the north gate," I told the dispatcher. "Level 3 threat. Do not engage unless they breach the perimeter, but I need a team here now." Latoya was still screaming at the intercom. "Did you hear me? He is dying. You are going to kill your own father because you are too selfish to push a button." I leaned into the microphone again. "If he is having a medical emergency, I will call an ambulance for you. They can treat him right there on the street. But that gate stays closed." Latoya's face twisted. The mask of the concerned daughter slipped for a second, revealing the jealousy underneath. "You ungrateful witch," she hissed. "After 10 years, this is how you treat us. We are your family. We just want to talk. Just want to talk." I looked at the monitor again. My eyes scanned the roof of the minivan. It was strapped down with a blue tarp bulging with luggage. I panned the camera down to the trunk, which had popped open from the impact of the crash. Inside, I could see boxes, not gift boxes, moving boxes. I counted quickly. There were at least 10 large suitcases strapped to the roof and stuffed in the trunk. People do not bring 10 suitcases for a Sunday visit. People do not bring their entire wardrobe and kitchen appliances just to catch up. They were not here to visit. They were here to move in. The realization hit me like a splash of ice water. They did not just want money. They had lost something. Maybe their home, maybe their business. And they had decided that my home was their backup plan. Gavin was now kicking the gate. "We are not leaving," he yelled. "You owe us this. We made you who you are. If it wasn't for us pushing you out of the nest, you would still be nothing. Now open this gate before I drive this car right through it." I watched him back up the minivan a few feet, preparing to ram the gate again. The audacity was breathtaking. 10 years of silence. 10 years of me rebuilding my life from the ashes they left me in. And now they show up demanding entry, as if they hold the deed to my property. I took a sip of my wine, the metallic taste of adrenaline mixing with the vintage red. They thought they could bully me. They thought I was still the 22-year-old girl who cried when they missed her graduation. They had no idea that the woman standing on the other side of this gate was not just a CEO. I was a predator who had spent a decade sharpening her claws. I spoke into the intercom one last time. "Go ahead, Gavin. Ram the gate again. The repair bill will just be added to the lien I already hold on your assets." He paused. The car idled. He looked confused. He did not know what I knew. He did not know that while they were driving here thinking they could ambush me, I had already run a full background check. I knew about the gambling debts. I knew about the second mortgage. And most importantly, I knew that they had nowhere else to go. Moments later, 2 black SUVs with the Blackwood Security logo rolled up behind their minivan. 4 officers in tactical gear stepped out. The look on Gavin's face shifted from arrogance to pure fear. My father in the back seat suddenly seemed to recover from his heart attack, sitting up straight as he saw the uniformed officers approaching. I watched as the security team instructed them to step away from the vehicle. This was just the beginning. They had invaded my sanctuary, and they had brought their chaos to my doorstep. But as I watched them arguing with the guards, I made a promise to myself. They wanted to be part of my life again. Fine, I would let them in. But they were not walking into a shelter. They were walking into a trap. And by the time I was done with them, they would wish they had stayed gone for another 10 years. The red and white strobe lights of the ambulance bounced off the limestone facade of my home, turning my sanctuary into a chaotic disco of emergency signals. The siren had cut through the quiet exclusivity of Buckhead, drawing the gaze of neighbors who usually pretended not to see anything. I stood at the threshold of my front door, my arms crossed, watching the performance of a lifetime. My father, Desmond, was currently lying on a stretcher, clutching his chest with the theatrical desperation of a soap opera actor. The paramedics were moving efficiently, checking vitals and asking questions, but every time they touched him, he let out a groan that was just loud enough to be heard over the idling engine of the ambulance. I had no choice. That was the brilliance of their plan. If I kept the gate closed while my father claimed to be dying on the pavement, I would not just be the estranged daughter. I would be a monster. The headlines would write themselves. Local CEO lets father perish at gates of $8 million estate. It was a trap and we both knew it. I signaled to the head of my security team, a large man named Marcus, who looked as frustrated as I felt. "Open it," I said quietly. "Let the medical team in." The heavy iron gates swung open with a smooth, silent hum. The ambulance rolled up the long paved driveway, its tires crunching on the gravel accents. But before the gates could close behind it, the rusted Honda Odyssey revved its engine. Gavin slammed his foot on the gas, shooting the minivan through the gap just inches before the iron bars locked again. He didn't park in the designated guest area. He drove straight onto the manicured zoysia grass of my front lawn, the tires tearing deep, muddy ruts into the landscaping I had paid $40,000 to install just last month. The engine of their car sputtered and died, and the doors flew open. While the paramedics were distracted trying to stabilize my father, who was now miraculously sitting up and demanding water, Gavin and Latoya bypassed the medical scene entirely. They didn't rush to hold their father's hand. They didn't ask the doctors about his condition. They sprinted toward my front door. I tried to block the entrance, stepping into the center of the double mahogany doors. "You are not coming inside," I stated, my voice echoing in the stone portico. "Stay with your father." Latoya laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. She pushed past me with a strength born of pure entitlement, her shoulder checking mine hard enough to make me stumble in my heels. "Move, Dominique. It is 90 degrees out here. We need to cool down before we deal with the police you called." Before I could regain my balance, Gavin had already maneuvered his way into the grand foyer. He stopped dead in his tracks, spinning in a slow circle, his mouth hanging open. The foyer was my pride and joy, designed to impress investors and intimidate rivals. A crystal chandelier the size of a small car hung from the 30-foot ceiling. The floors were imported Italian marble, polished to a mirror finish. And directly ahead lay the formal living room, a space decorated in shades of pristine white and cream. "Damn," Gavin whistled, the sound echoing off the high ceilings. "I knew you were doing okay, Dom, but I didn't know you were living like a drug lord." He walked straight into the living room. I followed him, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Gavin, get out. I am serious." He ignored me completely. He was wearing cargo shorts that were stained with what looked like motor oil and grease. Without a moment's hesitation, he threw his heavy body onto my custom-made sectional sofa. The leather was white, sourced from a boutique tannery in Milan. As he slid back, resting his dirty boots on the glass coffee table, I watched in horror as a dark smear of grime transferred from his clothes onto the pristine surface of the couch. "Ah, that is better," he groaned, stretching his arms out. "You know, for a house this big, it is awfully quiet. Where is the help?" I stared at him, unable to process the sheer audacity. "Excuse me." "The help," Gavin repeated, looking around as if expecting a butler to materialize from the walls. "You got a maid? A chef? Someone to bring me a beer? Or are you too stingy to hire people from our community? That is the problem with you new rich folks. You forget where you came from. You keep all the money for yourself. Kibo, that is what you are. Cheap." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I was shaking not with fear, but with a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. I employed over 300 people in Atlanta. I paid for full scholarships for 20 students every year. And this man, who had not held a steady job since the Obama administration, was calling me stingy while ruining my furniture. Meanwhile, Latoya had made herself comfortable on the other end of the sofa. She pulled out her phone, holding it up in the air, trying to find a signal. "What is the Wi-Fi password, Dominique?" she asked, her tone bored, as if she were asking a waiter for a menu. "My data is slow out here in the woods, and I need to update my status so people know we are safe." "You are not safe," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "You are trespassing." Latoya rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. Dad is fine. Look." I glanced out the floor-to-ceiling windows. The paramedics were packing up their gear. My father, who moments ago was clutching his chest in agony, was now standing by the ambulance signing a refusal of transport form. He looked remarkably healthy for a man who had just survived a cardiac event. He waved the ambulance away and began walking toward the house, a smug smile playing on his lips. The Trojan horse had worked perfectly. The gates were open, the enemy was inside, and the medical professionals had served their purpose as unwitting accomplices. I turned back to Gavin, who had stood up and was wandering toward the wet bar in the corner of the room. It was a sleek backlit display of rare spirits and wines I had collected over the years. "Hey, don't touch that," I warned, taking a step forward. Gavin reached for a bottle on the top shelf. It was a Chateau Lafite Rothschild, a vintage bottle I had bought at an auction in Paris to celebrate my first $1 million contract. It was worth $5,000. I was saving it for my wedding day, or perhaps the day I finally felt like I had nothing left to prove. He squinted at the label. "French gibberish," he muttered. "Probably tastes like vinegar. But I am thirsty." Before I could reach him, he grabbed a corkscrew from the counter. He didn't carefully cut the foil or gently ease the cork out. He jammed the metal spiral into the neck of the bottle and ripped it upward with brute force. Cork crumbs fell into the wine. He didn't look for a glass. He lifted the bottle, my $5,000 symbol of achievement, to his lips and took a long, glugging swig. Red wine trickled down his chin, dripping onto his stained t-shirt and splashing onto the marble floor. He pulled the bottle away, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and grimaced. "Tastes like dirt," he announced, slamming the bottle down on the quartz countertop hard enough to risk cracking the glass. "You got any Hennessy? Or did you become too white for that too?" The sound of the heavy bottle hitting the counter was the snapping point. Something inside me shifted. The shock of the invasion was fading, replaced by the calculating precision that had made me a CEO. They were not just family members behaving badly. They were vandals. They were financial liabilities. And they had just made the mistake of getting comfortable in a war zone. LaToya was now tapping away on her phone. Ugh, never mind, I guessed it. Is it really Success 2024? God, you are so corny, Dominique. Oh, look, Mom is coming in. My mother Betty walked through the front door. She carried a large casserole dish covered in aluminum foil, looking for all the world like she was arriving for Sunday dinner and not a hostile takeover. She surveyed the room, her eyes landing on the smear of dirt on the white sofa and the spilled wine on the floor. She didn't scold Gavin. She didn't apologize to me. She looked at me with a disappointed sigh. "Dominique, look at this mess," she said, shaking her head. "You invite us over and the place is already in shambles. You really need a woman's touch in here. Good thing we came to help you get organized." I looked from my mother to Gavin, who was burping loudly, to LaToya, who was scrolling through Instagram, and finally to my father, who was walking through the door with his suitcase. They had breached the walls. They were drinking my wine. They were muddying my floors. They thought they had won. They thought that by physically occupying the space, they could bully me into submission, just like they did when I was a teenager. But they had forgotten one crucial detail. This house was not just a home. It was a smart fortress. Every corner was wired with high-definition audio and video recording. Every word Gavin had said, every threat, every admission of their intent to stay, was being uploaded to a cloud server that my lawyer had direct access to. I took a deep breath, smoothing the fabric of my silk blouse. I walked over to the wall panel and adjusted the thermostat, dropping the temperature to 60 degrees. If they wanted to freeze me out, I would return the favor literally. "Make yourselves comfortable," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Enjoy the wine, Gavin. It cost more than the car you drove here in." Gavin laughed, thinking it was a joke. He raised the bottle in a mock toast. "Thanks, sis. We are going to be here a while." "We will see about that," I whispered to myself as I turned my back on them and walked toward my office. The Trojan horse had emptied its soldiers into my city, but they didn't know that I had already begun to burn the city down around them. The sound of silver forks scraping against my imported bone china was the only thing filling the silence of the dining room. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table, watching the people who shared my DNA devour the meal my private chef had prepared. It was a roasted duck breast with a cherry reduction served alongside truffle mashed potatoes, a meal that cost more than the groceries they used to buy for a month when I was a child. Yet looking at their faces, you would think I had served them fast food on a paper plate. Gavin was the first to break the silence. He stabbed a piece of duck with his fork, holding it up to the light like a health inspector looking for a violation. "It is a little pink, isn't it?" he mumbled, chewing with his mouth open. "You would think for what you pay that chef of yours he could cook a bird all the way through. But I guess this is how rich folks eat. Raw and expensive." I took a sip of my sparkling water, forcing the bile down my throat. I did not correct him. I did not tell him that medium rare was the standard for duck breast. I just watched him wipe his grease-stained hand on one of my linen napkins. My mother Betty set her fork down and sighed. It was a heavy, dramatic sound that I knew all too well. It was the sound that usually preceded a lecture or a guilt trip. She looked around the room, her eyes lingering on the original oil paintings on the walls and the crystal chandelier overhead. "Dominique, baby." She started, her voice trembling with a practiced fragility. "I know you must be wondering why we stayed away for so long, why we did not call, why we did not visit." I set my glass down. I was not wondering that at all. I knew exactly why. Because I had no money for them to take. But I remained silent, letting her spin her web. "We wanted to give you space." She continued, reaching across the table to try and touch my hand. I pulled it away instinctively, reaching for the salt shaker instead. "We knew you were building something big, Dominique. We saw your success. We were so proud. But we did not want to be a distraction. We knew that if we were in your life, you might feel obligated to take care of us, and that would slow you down. So we made the hard choice. We sacrificed our relationship with our daughter so that you could fly. We stayed silent because we loved you too much to hold you back." I stared at her, feeling a laugh bubbling up in my chest. It was a dark, bitter laugh. The audacity was breathtaking. She was rewriting history right in front of me. She was turning 10 years of neglect into a noble act of martyrdom. "You gave me space." I repeated, my voice flat. "Is that what you call it?" "Yes," she nodded eagerly, tears welling up in her eyes. "It broke my heart every day, baby, but we did it for you." My mind flashed back to when I was 24 years old. I was 2 years into starting my logistics company, driving a beat-up sedan to deliver medical samples because I could not afford drivers yet. A drunk driver had T-boned me at an intersection downtown. My car was totaled. My leg was broken in 2 places. I was lying in a hospital bed at Grady Memorial, terrified and alone with bills piling up. I had called home. I had called my mother. I begged her to just come and sit with me, or maybe lend me $500 to cover the insurance deductible so I could get a rental car and keep working. I remembered her words perfectly. She had said, "You chose to leave this family, Dominique. You chose to chase money instead of God. Figure it out yourself." And then she had hung up. I looked at her now, sitting in my dining room, wearing a blouse that was too tight, eating my food and lying to my face. "I seem to recall calling you when I was in the hospital," I said quietly. "When my leg was shattered. You did not seem very concerned about my success then. You told me I was on my own." My father, Desmond, cleared his throat loudly, slamming his hand on the table. "Now stop that!" he barked, pointing a finger at me. "Do not dwell on the past. Your mother is trying to apologize. She is trying to heal this family. Why do you always have to be so difficult, Dominique? This is exactly why we had issues before. You hold on to grudges instead of showing grace." Latoya, who had been busy picking the truffles out of her potatoes because she thought they were mushrooms, finally looked up. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, smearing lipstick across her cheek. "Seriously, Dom," she said. "Mom is crying. Are you happy? You have the big house and the money, but you are still so bitter. Just accept the apology so we can move on to the important stuff. The important stuff. I knew this was coming. The preamble was over. Now came the demand. And what is the important stuff, Latoya? I asked. Latoya pushed her plate away. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. She looked around the dining room, then glanced toward the grand staircase in the foyer. Well, obviously we cannot sleep in the car, she said, as if stating a fact of nature. And this house is huge. It is just you here. It is ridiculous for one person to have 6 bedrooms. So we have been talking. She gestured between herself and Gavin. Since we are going to be staying here for a while until we get back on our feet, we need to sort out the living arrangements. Gavin and I need the master suite on the 2nd floor. I blinked. I actually blinked. The master suite. My bedroom. The room with the fireplace, the private balcony, and the walk-in closet that was larger than their old apartment. Excuse me, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Well, it makes the most sense. Latoya continued, talking over me. We are a couple. We need space. Plus, Gavin is working on some very sensitive financial projects. He needs a quiet environment to focus. The master suite is the most isolated room in the house. I looked at Gavin. He was picking his teeth with a fingernail. Financial projects, I asked. Gavin sat up straighter, adjusting his collar. Yeah, investment research, crypto markets, high-level stuff. I cannot have distractions. I need total silence during trading hours. And your office downstairs has too much glass. The master suite has those blackout curtains. It is perfect. I felt like I was in a fever dream. My unemployed brother-in-law, who had just lost their house gambling on Dogecoin, was demanding my bedroom so he could do investment research. And where exactly do you propose I sleep in my own house? I asked. Latoya waved her hand dismissively toward the back of the property. The guest house, obviously. It is nice. I saw it on the way in. It has a kitchen and everything. Besides, you are always at work anyway. You barely use the main house. It is wasted on you. You are single. You do not need a king-sized bed. It is just logic, Dominique. My mother nodded in agreement, dabbing her dry eyes with the napkin. It does make sense, baby, she chimed in. Your sister has been through so much stress lately. She needs a comfortable place to rest, and Gavin is the man of the house now that he is here. He needs a proper space to lead. You know how the Bible says we should honor the head of the household. It would be a nice gesture for you to give them the big room. Show them you really want to help. I looked at the 4 of them. My father nodding in agreement with the misogyny. My mother weaponizing religion to enable her favorites. My sister the queen of entitlement. And Gavin the parasite. They were not asking, they were telling. They had been in my house for less than 3 hours, and they were already evicting me from my own bedroom. A normal person would have screamed. A normal person would have thrown the roast duck at them and called the police. But I was not a normal person anymore. I was a CEO. I was a strategist. And I realized that if I kicked them out now, they would just play the victim card to the world. They would sue me. They would drag my name through the mud. No. I needed them to destroy themselves. I needed Gavin to feel comfortable enough to make a mistake. I needed Latoya to think she had won, so she would let her guard down. I took a deep breath, standing up from the table. I picked up my wine glass, looking down at them. Fine, I said. Latoya's eyes widened. Really? Yes, I lied, keeping my face completely neutral. You are right. Family comes first. You can take the 2nd floor. All of it. I will move my things to the guest house tonight. Gavin smirked, slapping the table. Now that is what I am talking about. See Betty. I told you she would come around. She just needed a little reminder of who is in charge. He stood up, walking past me to head toward the stairs, not even clearing his plate. I am going to go check out the shower pressure, he announced. Hope you have those rainfall shower heads, Dom. I watched them all disperse, treating my home like a hotel they had conquered. I walked to the kitchen, placing my glass in the sink. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of holding back my rage. Enjoy the master suite, Gavin, I whispered to the empty room. Because once you sign those papers, I am preparing the only room you will have with blackout curtains will be a jail cell. The air conditioning in the guest house hummed with a quiet efficiency that my main residence no longer possessed. While my family snored in my Egyptian cotton sheets across the lawn, I sat at a glass desk in what they considered the servants' quarters. They had no idea that this guest house was better equipped than their entire former life. It was here, surrounded by the cool glow of 3 monitors, that I began to dissect the anatomy of their failure. My father had looked me in the eye over roasted duck and blamed the economy for their homelessness. He talked about inflation and rising property taxes. It was a convenient story. It was also a lie. I did not become the CEO of a logistics empire by accepting surface-level explanations. In my world, when a shipment goes missing, we track it. When a route fails, we analyze the data. And when a family that has owned the same home for 30 years suddenly shows up with their lives packed into a minivan, there is always a paper trail. I picked up my encrypted phone and dialed a number that very few people in Atlanta possess. It was 2 in the morning, but the man on the other end answered on the first ring. He was a forensic accountant named Julian who specialized in finding money that people did not want found. "I need everything on Desmond and Betty Williams," I said, my voice low. "And I need a deep dive on Gavin Miller. I want to know why they lost the house on Oak Street. I want to know where the money went. And I want to know who signed the papers." Julian did not ask questions. He just asked for 10 minutes. I spent those 10 minutes pacing the floor of the guest house. Through the window, I could see the silhouette of my main house against the night sky. The lights in the master bedroom were finally off. I imagined Gavin sprawling out in my bed, dreaming of spending my money. I imagined LaToya looking through my closet, calculating which designer bags she could steal and sell on the internet. They were sleeping soundly because they thought they had solved their problem. They thought they had found a new host to attach themselves to. My computer chimed. The email from Julian had arrived. The subject line was simple: Asset Tracing Report. I sat down and opened the file. The first document was a foreclosure notice dated 3 weeks ago. That was expected, but what came next made my blood run cold. It was a copy of a second mortgage taken out on my parents' home exactly 6 months ago. It was a home equity line of credit for $300,000. I zoomed in on the signature line. There was my father's handwriting. It was shaky, a little uneven, but it was definitely his. He had signed away the equity in the home he had worked his whole life to pay off. But why? My father was a man who reused tea bags to save money. He was risk-averse. He did not gamble. He did not invest in high-risk ventures. He kept his cash under a mattress because he did not trust banks. I scrolled down to the disbursement section. The $300,000 had not gone into my parents' joint checking account. It had been wired directly to a shell company called Miller Strategies, LLC. I did not need a degree in finance to know who Miller was. I opened the second attachment, which tracked the movement of funds from Miller Strategies. The money had stayed in the account for less than 48 hours. From there, it had been transferred in 3 large chunks to an offshore cryptocurrency exchange. Gavin. I leaned back in my chair, the pieces falling into place with a sickening clarity. Gavin had not been researching investments in my living room. He had been looking for his next fix. He had convinced my aging father to take out a loan against his house, promising him what? A massive return. A way to retire in luxury. A way to finally be richer than the daughter they had cast aside. I looked at the transaction dates. February 14th. The money went in. February 16th. The money was converted to a speculative coin that I recognized from the news. It was a pump and dump scheme that had crashed violently in March. By April, the $300,000 was worth less than $400. Gavin had not just lost their money, he had incinerated it. He had taken the roof over my parents' heads, their security, their legacy, and he had gambled it away on a digital pipe dream in less than a month. But there was one more document in the file. It was a witness affidavit required for the loan. Since my father was over 70, the bank required a witness to ensure he was of sound mind and not being coerced. I stared at the witness signature. The loops were large and flamboyant. The I was dotted with a small circle. LaToya. My sister had been there. She had sat in the room while Gavin slid the papers across the table to our father. She had watched Dad sign away his life savings. She knew that Gavin was a gambling addict with a history of failure. She knew that this was a death sentence for their finances. And she had signed her name right next to his. She was not a victim. She was an accomplice. The rage I felt earlier at dinner was hot and fiery. This new feeling was different. It was cold. It was clinical. It was the feeling of a judge reading a verdict. They had lied to me about everything. Dad said it was the economy protecting his pride and protecting the son-in-law he valued more than me. Mom said they stayed away to give me space, covering up the shame of their destitution. And LaToya. LaToya had the nerve to call me selfish. She had the nerve to demand my bedroom while she harbored the secret that she had helped destroy our parents' lives. I looked at the screen at the digital trail of their betrayal. This was not just bad luck. This was financial elder abuse. Gavin was a predator who preyed on the elderly and the gullible. LaToya was the gatekeeper who let him in, and my parents were the willing victims who would rather lose everything to a man than accept help from their successful daughter. I saved the files to a secure cloud drive. I printed hard copies and locked them in the safe, hidden in the floor of the guest house. I could have gone over there right now. I could have kicked down the door of the master suite, thrown the papers in Gavin's face, and dragged him out to the street by his ear. I could have shaken my father awake and showed him that his golden boy was a thief. But that would be too easy. That would be messy. It would give them a chance to deny it, to make excuses, to cry and say it was a mistake. Gavin would say the market crashed and it wasn't his fault. Dad would defend him because admitting he was scammed would mean admitting he was a fool. No, I needed more than just the truth. I needed a public execution of their lies. I turned off the monitors, plunging the room into darkness. I walked to the window and looked at the main house again. Let them sleep. Let Gavin enjoy the high thread count sheets. Let LaToya dream of inheriting my empire. Let them think they have gotten away with it. Because when I finally reveal this, it will not be in a private conversation. It will not be in a guest house at 2 a.m. I was going to wait until they felt safe. I was going to wait until they felt victorious. And then I was going to use this paper trail to hang them. I went to the small bedroom in the guest house and lay down. I did not sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, formulating the next steps. They wanted money. I would dangle it. They wanted status. I would show it to them. And just when they reached out to grab it, I would show them exactly what $300,000 of stupidity looks like. Gavin Miller had stolen my parents' past, but he had just given me the weapon to control their future. And unlike him, I never made a bad investment. I drove my Bentley Continental GT through the winding roads of Buckhead, the silence of the cabin providing a brief respite from a day of negotiating 7-figure contracts. My mind was still running numbers, calculating margins for the new fleet of refrigerated transport trucks I had just ordered. I was exhausted, but it was a good exhaustion. It was the feeling of building something tangible. I was looking forward to a quiet evening in the guest house, perhaps reviewing the forensic accounting files I had received the night before. I wanted to see exactly how deep the hole was that my brother-in-law had dug. But as I turned the final corner onto my street, the peace I craved was shattered. I did not need to see my house to know something was wrong. I could hear it. A heavy, distorted bass line was thumping through the air, vibrating the windows of my car, even before I reached the driveway. It was not the jazz or classical music I played during my private downtime. It was aggressive, loud, explicit trap music, the kind that rattled license plates and set off car alarms. I pressed the remote to open the front gate, my stomach tightening. The driveway, usually pristine and empty, was cluttered with cars, not the luxury sedans of my neighbors or colleagues. These were beat-up Altimas with mismatched bumpers, rust bucket sedans leaking oil onto my pavers, and a few motorcycles parked haphazardly on the grass. I parked my car near the garage, stepping out into the humid Atlanta evening. The air smelled of menthol cigarettes and cheap marijuana, a scent that clung to the humidity and clashed violently with the jasmine I had planted along the perimeter. I walked toward the back of the house, following the noise. When I rounded the corner to the pool area, I stopped dead in my tracks. My sanctuary had been turned into a nightclub. There were at least 30 people there, strangers I had never met, swarming over my property like locusts. They were in my pool, splashing water onto the imported limestone deck. They were lounging on my outdoor furniture, their wet bodies soaking into the custom weather-resistant fabric. And in the center of it all was LaToya. She was wearing a neon pink bikini that was struggling to contain her holding court on one of my chaise lounges like she was the Queen of Sheba. She was laughing loudly, throwing her head back as a man with gold teeth poured champagne into her mouth straight from the bottle. I squinted at the bottle. It was a crystal gold medallion, a limited edition vintage I had received as a thank you gift from a pharmaceutical CEO in Switzerland. It was worth $600 a bottle. And here was my sister, unemployed and destitute, treating it like it was a $5 soda. I watched as the man finished pouring, then casually tossed the empty, heavy glass bottle over his shoulder. It smashed against the stone retaining wall, sending shards of glass glittering into the grass where my gardener worked every Tuesday. "Yo, Toya, this place is crazy!" one of the guests shouted over the music. "Your sister really got it like this." LaToya waved her hand dismissively, clearly intoxicated on both the alcohol and the power trip. "Yeah, she does all right," LaToya slurred. "But you know it is family money, really. She just manages it. This is basically my crib, too. We are taking over now." The rage that filled me was different from the night before. Last night was personal betrayal. This was a violation of my space, my hard work, and my peace. These people did not care about the architecture or the landscaping. To them, my home was just a backdrop for their content, a place to get high and pretend to be rich for a few hours. I walked closer, my heels clicking sharply on the stone. A few people turned to look at me, their expressions ranging from indifference to hostility. I was wearing a tailored Givenchy suit, standing stiffly with my briefcase, looking like the narc at a high school party. "Who is that?" someone asked. "That is the help." LaToya laughed, standing up unsteadily. "No, I am kidding. That is Dominique. Hey, little sister, you are home early. Come have a drink. Meet my friends. This is Trey, and over there is Keisha. We are just breaking in the pool." It was looking too lonely. She gestured to the chaos around her as if she were doing me a favor. I looked at the pool. Floating in the deep end was one of my outdoor dining chairs. It was a teak wood chair, hand-carved, weighing about 40 pounds. Someone had thrown it in there for a laugh. The chlorine would bleach the wood, ruining the finish within hours. "Get out," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the music for those standing close enough to hear. LaToya rolled her eyes, stumbling slightly as she stepped toward me. "Oh my God, here she goes," she groaned to her friends. "The fun police is here. Relax, Dom. We are celebrating." Celebrating what? I asked, stepping back to avoid the splash of pool water coming from a cannonball jump behind her. "Celebrating the fact that you lost your house, celebrating that you scammed our parents, or celebrating that you are trespassing." LaToya's face hardened. She stepped into my personal space, smelling of chlorine and expensive champagne. "We are celebrating the fact that I am living here now," she hissed. "And since I live here, I can have guests. You said we could have the main house, remember? That means this is my territory. So why do not you go back to your little shed in the backyard and let us live?" She turned her back on me, picking up another bottle of wine from the table. It was a Pinot Noir I had been aging for 5 years. "Turn the music up!" she screamed to the DJ who had set up his equipment on my outdoor kitchen counter, scratching the marble surface. I stood there for 3 seconds. 3 seconds of pure calculating silence. She wanted to play territory. She wanted to claim the main house as her dominion. She thought that because I had yielded the bedroom, I had yielded control. She was wrong. I turned around and walked away. I did not scream. I did not fight. I walked straight to the guest house. I entered the cool, quiet space and locked the door behind me. I sat down at my desk and pulled up the smart home control panel on my main monitor. The entire property was networked. Lighting, security, climate control, and most importantly, utilities. I navigated to the zone control menu. Zone 1, main house. Zone 2, pool and patio. I hovered my mouse over the power icon for Zone 2. Click. Outside, the thumping bass cut out instantly. The music died mid-beat. The decorative landscape lights that illuminated the pool area flickered and went black. The only light remaining was the moonlight and the glow from cell phone screens. I heard shouts of confusion from the yard. "Yo, what happened?" someone yelled. The music died. I was not done. I moved my cursor to the water control. Zone 2. Water features. Click. The waterfalls cascading into the pool stopped. The jets in the hot tub sputtered and went silent. Then I moved to Zone 1. The main house. If they wanted to live there, they needed to understand who paid the electric bill. Click. I watched through the window as the massive chandeliers in the foyer went dark. The lights in the kitchen, the living room, and the master bedroom all extinguished simultaneously. The massive air conditioning units, which were humming loudly to combat the 90-degree heat, shuddered to a halt. My phone rang almost immediately. It was LaToya. I let it ring. I watched from my darkened window as the party guests began to panic. Without music and lights, the vibe had shifted from a celebration to a confused gathering in the dark. I saw phone flashlights turning on, beaming around the yard like searchlights. I picked up the microphone connected to the outdoor PA system. This was usually used for security announcements, but tonight it was my gavel. "Attention," my voice boomed across the yard, echoing off the stone walls. "This is the property owner. The party is over. You are trespassing on private property. Security has been notified and police are en route." I paused, letting that sink in. I saw people scrambling, grabbing their cheap sandals and running toward the driveway. "And LaToya?" I continued, my voice cold and magnified. "I am watching the camera feeds. I see the teak chair in the pool. I see the broken glass. I see the wine stains on the stone." LaToya was standing in the middle of the dark patio, looking up at the speakers, screaming something I could not hear. "Every single item that is broken, damaged, or stolen is being logged," I announced. "The cost will be deducted from the allowance you begged for. And since you claim the main house as your territory, you can explain to your guests why there is no air conditioning tonight. I have cut the power. It will remain off until every stranger is off my property and the mess is cleaned up." I released the button. The exodus was rapid. I watched as the beat-up cars peeled out of my driveway, leaving tire marks on the pavement. The freeloaders did not want to stick around for the police or the heat. Within 5 minutes, the yard was empty except for LaToya, Gavin, and my parents, who had wandered out in their pajamas, looking confused and frightened in the sudden darkness. Gavin was yelling, kicking a pool float. LaToya was crying, smashing her fists against the outdoor table. I leaned back in my chair, watching the thermal camera feed. The temperature in the main house was already beginning to rise. Atlanta summer nights were unforgiving. By midnight, that master bedroom would be a sauna. They wanted to be the masters of the house. Fine, but a house is just a box of brick and mortar until someone pays to make it alive. They were about to learn a very hot, sticky, and dark lesson about the difference between ownership and occupancy. I opened a new spreadsheet on my computer. I titled it Damages and Debts. Item 1. Vintage crystal champagne, $600. Item 2. Teak chair restoration, $400. Item 3. Landscaping repairs, $1,000. I started typing the click of my mechanical keyboard, the only sound in the room. They thought the bill for the party was the cost of the drinks. They had no idea that I was just starting to write the invoice for their entire existence. The air conditioning in the guest house was set to a crisp 68 degrees. It was a silent hum of luxury that stood in stark contrast to the humid oven I had created in the main residence across the lawn. I sat in my leather executive chair watching the digital clock on my monitor tick past midnight. The party guests were gone. The music had stopped. But the war had just moved to a new battlefield. My phone, which I had set to silent, began to vibrate against the glass desktop. It was not a rhythmic buzzing of a call. It was a continuous frantic spasm of notifications. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. The icons flashed rapidly, merging into a single blur of digital panic. I picked up the device, my stomach tightening. I did not have to guess who was responsible. I opened Instagram, and there she was. Latoya was live. The video feed was grainy, lit only by the harsh, unflattering beam of a cell phone flashlight. The angle was low, designed to make her look small and vulnerable. Behind her, the shadows of my main living room loomed like a haunted house. She had positioned our parents, Desmond and Betty, on the sofa in the background. My father was fanning himself with a piece of cardboard, his shirt unbuttoned to show his sweating chest. My mother was wiping her forehead with a damp cloth, looking into the camera with the eyes of a frightened animal. Latoya began to speak, her voice trembling with a theatrically practiced sorrow. "I am sorry the lighting is so bad, you guys," she whispered, sniffing loudly. "I am trying to save battery. We have been in the dark for 3 hours now. It is 90 degrees in here." My sister? She cut the power. She cut the water. She knows Dad has a heart condition. She knows Mom cannot take this heat, but she just does not care. I watched the viewer count climb. 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. "She locked us in here," Latoya continued, tears finally spilling onto her cheeks. The glistening sweat on her face made her look even more distressed, a detail I was sure she had calculated by not wiping it away. "We came to her for help because we lost our home. We just wanted a roof over our heads. And this is how the great CEO Dominique treats her own flesh and blood. She is sleeping in the air-conditioned guest house right now while her elderly parents roast in this heat." The comments section was moving so fast it was a blur of rage. "Unbelievable. Eat the rich. Boycott Dom Logistics. Someone call the police. She is a monster." I felt a cold sweat break out on my own skin despite the chill in the room. This was not just a family squabble anymore. This was a targeted assassination of my character. Latoya knew exactly what she was doing. In the current social climate, a wealthy CEO abusing her poor elderly parents was the ultimate sin. She was weaponizing my success against me. I switched tabs to Twitter. The hashtag boycott Dominique was already trending in Atlanta. A user with the handle at Justice for the People had posted a screenshot of my company website, alongside a photo of my father looking faint on the sofa. The caption read, "This woman ships medical supplies to save lives, but tries to kill her own father with heat stroke. Make it make sense." Then came the email I was dreading. It was from my PR crisis manager, Sarah. The subject line was urgent. "Dominique, we have a problem. The Asian markets just opened and our partners in Singapore are asking questions about the social media firestorm. Stock sentiment is dipping. We are down 2% in after-hours trading. We need a statement, now." I stared at the screen, my hand hovering over the keyboard. My first instinct was to fight fire with fire. I wanted to post the foreclosure documents. I wanted to post the evidence of Gavin's gambling. I wanted to tell the world that the poor elderly parents were complicit in fraud and that the innocent sister had just thrown a rager that destroyed my property. But I stopped. If I engaged now in the heat of the moment, I would look defensive. I would look like I was punching down. The internet does not care about facts when they have a juicy narrative of the oppressed versus the oppressor. If I argued, I would just give her more content. I would keep the algorithm feeding her lies to more people. I looked back at the live stream. LaToya was now holding up a bottle of warm water, taking a dramatic sip. "We might have to leave, guys," she sobbed. "I do not know where we will go. Maybe a shelter. I just hope my dad makes it through the night." My father let out a weak cough on cue. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. I minimized the window. I could not watch anymore. My blood was boiling, but my mind had to stay cold. This was damaging, yes, but it was also a mistake. LaToya had overplayed her hand. By taking this public, she had made a claim that could be legally tested. She had accused me of abuse. She had accused me of endangering life. These were not just insults, they were defamatory statements that impacted my business revenue. I opened a new email draft, addressing it to my legal team. Subject: defamation and business interference. Body: please preserve all social media footage from the account at LaToya Lives immediately. Calculate the drop in share price and correlate it with the timestamps of her live stream. I want a forensic evaluation of the damages to the brand. Do not issue a cease and desist yet. Let her keep talking. The more she lies, the bigger the settlement. I hit send. Then I picked up the iPad that controlled the smart home. I looked at the Zone 1 controls again. Part of me, the part that was still the little sister wanting approval, wanted to turn the lights back on. I wanted to stop the hate comments. I wanted to show them I was not a monster. But then I remembered the text message from 10 years ago. "Don't come back." I remembered the look on Gavin's face when he drank my $5,000 wine. I remembered the teak chair rotting in the pool. They were using the internet to bully me into submission just like they used to use silence. If I turned the power back on now, they would learn that terrorism works. They would learn that all they had to do was threaten my reputation, and I would open my wallet. Number 1. I left the power off. I walked to the window and looked out at the main house. It was pitch black save for the flashlights moving around inside like fireflies in a jar. They were sweating. Good. Let them sweat. Let them feel a fraction of the discomfort I felt when I was sleeping in my car 10 years ago, because they refused to help me. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Sarah, my PR manager. "Dom TMZ just picked up the story. We have reporters camping at the front gate." "What do you want to do?" I typed back a reply that was short and brutally simple. "Let them camp. And tell security to tow any vehicle that blocks the entrance. I am going to sleep." I turned off the lights in the guest house. I lay in the dark listening to the hum of the AC. The stock price might drop tomorrow. The comments might be cruel, but I knew something the internet did not. LaToya had just tied her fate to a lie. And when the truth finally came out, when I finally released the evidence I was hoarding, the fall would be so much harder because she had climbed so high on a ladder of falsehoods. I closed my eyes. The internet calls me a villain, I thought. Fine. I will be the villain. But in this story, the villain wins. The Sunday morning sun in Atlanta was unforgiving, baking the asphalt of my driveway until heat waves shimmied off the ground. I stepped out of the climate-controlled guest house, a travel mug of premium Ethiopian coffee in my hand, intending to do a perimeter check of the property. I expected to see my family miserable, sweating in the unpowered main house, perhaps ready to surrender and leave. Instead, I found a congregation. Parked right next to Gavin's battered minivan was a pristine white Cadillac Escalade with gold rims. Standing in the shade of the portico, wiping sweat from his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief, was Pastor Jenkins. He was a man of significant stature in the community, the leader of the Greater Hope Baptist Church, the same church my parents had attended for 30 years. He was wearing a cream-colored three-piece suit that looked immaculate despite the humidity, and he was flanked by my parents, who were dressed in their Sunday best, though their clothes looked wrinkled from living out of suitcases. My stomach tightened. This was their next play. If the internet mob could not break me, they would bring in God. In the African American community, the pastor is not just a spiritual leader, he is a judge, a jury, and a cultural gatekeeper. To defy him is to defy the community itself. My mother Betty spotted me first. She whispered something to the pastor, pointing a trembling finger in my direction. She looked frail, her eyes wide and pleading, a perfect picture of the suffering mother. Pastor Jenkins turned his face, arranging itself into a mask of benevolent concern. He walked toward me, arms open wide, his voice booming with the practiced cadence of a Sunday sermon. "Sister Dominique," he intoned, his baritone voice echoing off the limestone walls of my home. "It has been too long. The Lord has truly blessed you with abundance. Look at this sanctuary you have built. It is a testament to his favor." I stopped taking a sip of my coffee. I knew this game. I had grown up in it. The compliment was just the sugar coating on the bitter pill he was about to force feed me. "Good morning, Pastor," I said, keeping my tone polite but distant. "To what do I owe the pleasure of a house call?" He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne mixed with the scent of old Bibles. My parents and Latoya shuffled up behind him, forming a semicircle of judgment. Latoya was looking at the ground, playing the part of the repentant sister, but I could see the smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. She thought she had me checkmated. She thought I would never dare disrespect a man of God. "Your mother called me in great distress, Dominique," the pastor said, his voice dropping to a somber whisper. "She told me of the strife in this household. She told me that you have hardened your heart against your own flesh and blood, that you have turned off the lights and the water, leaving your elderly parents to suffer in the heat, while you live in comfort." He paused, letting the accusation hang in the heavy air. "The good book tells us to honor our father and our mother, so that our days may be long upon the land." He continued, quoting Exodus with a pointed stare. "It tells us that to whom much is given, much is required. You have been given much, Dominique. Are you being a good steward of these blessings by hoarding them while your family is in need?" My father Desmond nodded vigorously. "Amen, Pastor. Tell her. We sacrificed everything for her, and now she treats us like strangers." I looked at them. I looked at the sweat beading on my father's forehead, the fake tears in my mother's eyes, and the self-righteous tilt of the pastor's chin. They were using my faith as a weapon. They were twisting scripture to manipulate me into financing their failures. It was a strategy that had worked on thousands of women in our community for generations, shaming them into carrying the burden of grown men who refused to carry themselves. But I was not just a member of the flock anymore. I was a wolf who had learned to hunt. I took a step forward, looking Pastor Jenkins directly in the eye. I did not lower my head. I did not apologize. "Pastor, I respect your position." I began, my voice steady and clear. "But Proverbs also says that the one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him. You have heard their story. Now, are you willing to hear the truth, or are you just here to deliver a verdict?" The pastor blinked, surprised by my directness. He adjusted his silk tie. "I am here to facilitate reconciliation, Dominique. God is love, and love keeps no record of wrongs. You need to forgive your brother-in-law. You need to open your home. You cannot let money divide a family." "Love keeps no record of wrongs," I repeated. "That is beautiful. But does love also require me to finance a gambling addiction? Does love require me to enable theft?" I reached into my oversized tote bag and pulled out my iPad Pro. The screen was bright in the sunlight. I unlocked it and swiped to a document I had prepared for this exact moment. "You talk about stewardship, Pastor. You talk about me hoarding my blessings. Let us look at the numbers." I turned the screen toward him. It was a digital receipt from the Atlanta Children's Foundation. "This is a donation I made last year," I said, pointing to the figure. $1 million. It funded a new wing for orphans who have nowhere to go. I swiped to the next image. It was a thank you letter from the United Negro College Fund. "This is a scholarship fund I established 3 years ago. It pays for 50 students to go to college every semester, students who actually study and graduate." I swiped again, showing a list of charitable contributions that totaled more than the value of the house we were standing in front of. I do not hoard my blessings, Pastor, I said, my voice hardening. I share them. I share them with people who are trying to better themselves. I share them with the helpless. But what I do not do is throw my hard-earned money into a black hole of laziness and deceit. I walked past the pastor and stood in front of my father. Did they tell you why they lost their house, Pastor? Did they tell you that Gavin Miller took a second mortgage on my parents' home and gambled it away on cryptocurrency in less than a week? Did they tell you that my sister signed the witness papers knowingly helping him destroy my parents' financial future? The silence that followed was absolute. Even the cicadas seemed to stop buzzing. Pastor Jenkins turned slowly to look at my parents. His benevolent mask was slipping, replaced by a look of confusion and dawning realization. "Is this true, Brother Desmond?" the pastor asked. My father stammered, his face turning an ugly shade of gray. "Well, it was an investment. It was just bad luck. The market turned." "It was not bad luck," I cut in sharp as a knife. "It was greed. And now, after destroying their own home, they have come to mine. And because I refused to let Gavin turn my guest house into a casino, they called you. They dragged a man of God out here to shame me into submission." I turned back to the pastor. "You quoted the Bible to me, sir. Let me quote one back to you. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 verse 10. For even when we were with you, we gave you this rule. The one who is unwilling to work shall not eat." I pointed at Gavin, who was cowering behind the open door of the minivan. "That man is unwilling to work. He has not held a job in 5 years. He lives off my sister, and now he wants to live off me. And you are standing here on my property, telling me that it is my Christian duty to let a thief sleep in my bed." Pastor Jenkins looked at the receipts on my iPad. He looked at the $1 million donation. Then he looked at Gavin, who was wearing a pair of stolen Versace sunglasses. He looked at LaToya, whose expensive manicure clashed with her plea of poverty. The narrative was crumbling. He realized he had been played. He had been brought here to act as a heavy, to use his spiritual authority to bully a woman who was actually a pillar of the community. I stepped closer to him, lowering my voice, so only he and my family could hear. "I will continue to donate to the church, Pastor. I will continue to support the community. But I will not support parasites. If you want to take them in, if you want to house them in the rectory and pay for Gavin's gambling debts with the collection plate, be my guest. But do not come to my house and tell me I am going to hell because I refuse to be a victim." Pastor Jenkins cleared his throat. He pulled out his handkerchief and wiped his face again. But this time he looked uncomfortable. He looked at my mother, who was now sobbing for real, realizing that her divine intervention had backfired. "Sister Betty," the pastor said, his voice stiff, "you told me Dominique had abandoned you without cause. You did not mention the gambling. You did not mention the fraud. We just need help." "Pastor," my mother wailed. "We are family." "Family tells the truth," the pastor said, stepping back toward his car. He looked at me, and for the first time there was respect in his eyes. Not the condescending respect of a man for a woman, but the respect of a general recognizing another general. "I apologize for the intrusion, Sister Dominique," he said, nodding his head. "It seems I was not given the full picture. You are a good steward of your resources. I will pray for your family. But I cannot interfere in matters of financial discipline." He turned and walked to his Escalade. He did not offer my parents a ride. He did not offer them a blessing. He got in, started the engine, and drove away, the gravel crunching beneath his tires, like the sound of my family's last hope shattering. I stood there in the driveway, watching the white car disappear. I turned to my parents. The shame on their faces was palpable. They had tried to use the highest authority they knew to crush me, and I had used the truth to send him packing. I tapped the screen of my iPad, turning off the recording I had started the moment I walked out the door. "Nice try," I said to LaToya. "But next time you call for backup, make sure you tell them the whole story, because I have receipts for everything, even your sins." I turned around and walked back to the guest house, leaving them standing in the heat. The sun was getting higher, and it was going to be a very long, very hot day for the wicked. The man standing in the lobby of my corporate headquarters looked entirely out of place amidst the polished chrome and Italian glass that defined the aesthetic of Dom Logistics. He was wearing a suit that was 2 sizes too big, the fabric shiny with age, and he was sweating profusely in the air-conditioned coolness of the reception area. My executive assistant Sarah looked ready to call security, her finger hovering over the panic button beneath her desk. But I shook my head as I approached them, the click of my Louboutin heels echoing on the marble floor. I knew exactly what this was. In the world of business, you learn to recognize a process server from a mile away. "Are you Dominique Williams?" the man asked, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. He did not look me in the eye. He looked at the floor, clearly uncomfortable being the bearer of bad news in a building that cost more than his entire neighborhood. I replied, my voice cool and detached. He thrust a thick manila envelope toward me. "You have been served, ma'am. Have a nice day." He turned and practically ran for the revolving doors, desperate to escape the judgment of my staff. I stood there in the lobby holding the packet. I could feel the eyes of my employees on me. They were wondering if the company was being sued. They were wondering if I was in trouble. I offered them a reassuring smile, tucking the envelope under my arm, as if it were nothing more than a catering menu. Back in the sanctuary of my corner office, I sat down at my desk and slid a silver letter opener under the flap of the envelope. I expected many things. A restraining order from Gavin, perhaps. A defamation suit from LaToya regarding the party. But what I pulled out of that envelope was so audacious, so creatively evil, that for a moment I just stared at the cover page in silence. It was a civil lawsuit filed in the Superior Court of Fulton County. The plaintiff was listed as Desmond and Betty Williams. But as I read the legal jargon, the clumsy phrasing, and the aggressive demands, I knew my parents had not written this. This had Gavin's fingerprints all over it. The lawsuit cited a dusty, archaic statute known as the Filial Responsibility Law. It was a piece of legislation from the 1920s that was rarely enforced, designed to ensure that wealthy children did not let their parents starve to death while they lived in luxury. Gavin had found a lawyer, a man named Marcus J. Thorne, whose office address was listed in a strip mall next to a pawn shop, to weaponize this law against me. I turned to page 3 where the demands were listed. I had to blink to make sure I was reading the numbers correctly. Item 1. Immediate monthly spousal support for the maintenance of Desmond and Betty Williams in the amount of $15,000. Item 2. Retroactive payments for pain and suffering caused by emotional neglect over the past 10 years, totaling $500,000. Item 3. And this was the part that made my jaw tighten. Access to 50% of the primary residence located at the Buckhead estate to ensure the physical well-being of the plaintiffs, as the guest house is deemed insufficient for their medical needs. I leaned back in my chair. The office was silent, but inside my head, gears were turning at a furious pace. They were not just asking for money. They were trying to legally seize my home. They were trying to use a judge to force me to let Gavin and LaToya live in my master bedroom. The audacity was so absolute, so complete, that the anger I expected to feel never arrived. Instead, I felt a bubble of laughter rising in my chest. It started as a chuckle and then transformed into a full, hearty laugh that bounced off the glass walls of my office. They had done it. They had finally made the fatal mistake I had been waiting for. For days I had been holding on to the evidence of their fraud, waiting for the right moment to expose them. I had the bank records. I had the proof of the crypto gambling. But privacy laws made it difficult to just release that information to the public without looking like I was the one harassing them. But now they had sued me. By filing this lawsuit, they had made their financial situation a matter of public record. They had opened the door to a legal process called discovery. In a civil suit, the defendant has the right to investigate the plaintiff's finances to determine if their claims of poverty are legitimate. Gavin thought he was swinging a sword at my neck. He did not realize he had just handed me a loaded gun and pointed it at his own head. I picked up my desk phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It was the direct line to Sterling Vance, the most ruthless, expensive civil litigator in the state of Georgia. Sterling charged $1,000 an hour, and he was worth every penny. Dominique Sterling answered, his voice smooth as aged scotch. To what do I owe the pleasure? Are we acquiring another competitor today? Not today, Sterling, I said, spinning my chair around to look out at the Atlanta skyline. Today we are playing defense. My family just sued me for filial support. They want $15,000 a month and half my house. There was a pause on the line. Then Sterling let out a low whistle. Filial support. I have not seen one of those in 20 years. Who is their counsel? Marcus J. Thorne. I read from the document. I heard the sound of typing on the other end. Ah, yes, Sterling said, his tone dripping with amusement. Mr. Thorne. I believe his last big case was representing a woman who found a finger in her chili. He lost. Dominique, this is a nuisance suit. We can have this dismissed in a week. No, I said sharply. The line went quiet. I do not want it dismissed, Sterling. I want to fight it. Dominique Sterling said slowly, using his patient lawyer voice. Why would you want to drag this out? It will cost you more in my fees than just settling with them for a few months. Because I want discovery. I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. I want a full forensic audit of my parents' finances for the last 10 years. I want to depose my brother-in-law Gavin Miller under oath. I want to subpoena the bank records from the second mortgage they took out on their old house. And I want to ask my father on the record with a court reporter typing every word exactly where that $300,000 went. There was a long silence on the phone. Then I heard a sound I rarely heard from Sterling Vance. A dark, predatory chuckle. I see, Sterling said. You do not want to win the lawsuit. You want to use the lawsuit to build a criminal case for fraud. Exactly, I replied. They claim they are destitute because of the economy. I have proof they are destitute because Gavin stole their money and gambled it away. But if I say it, it is just family drama. If a court-appointed auditor says it, it is a felony. Dominique, you are terrifying, Sterling said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I will have the response filed by morning. We will countersue for abuse of process and emotional distress. And I will draft the discovery requests immediately. We are going to ask for every receipt, every bank transfer, and every crypto wallet address they have ever touched. Do it, I said. And Sterling, yes. Make sure the process server who delivers our response is not wearing a cheap suit. I want them to know exactly who they are dealing with. I hung up the phone. I picked up the lawsuit again. I ran my fingers over the cheap recycled paper. Gavin probably thought he was a genius right now. I imagined him back at the guest house drinking my beer, telling LaToya that I would be so scared of bad publicity that I would write a check by Friday. He thought he had trapped me. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Far below, the city of Atlanta moved in a rhythmic flow of traffic and commerce. It was a world of rules, of contracts, of consequences. Gavin had spent his whole life trying to skirt those rules. He thought the legal system was a lottery ticket. He was about to learn that the law is not a game of chance. It is a game of facts. And I had all of them. I looked down at the lawsuit one last time before tossing it into my shredder pile. $15,000 a month, I whispered to the empty room. Gavin, by the time I am done with you, the only state housing you will be eligible for is a 6x8 cell with a stainless steel toilet. And the best part is you are the one who filed the paperwork to make it happen. I sat back down at my desk and pulled up my calendar. I had a board meeting in 10 minutes. I checked my makeup in the reflection of my monitor. I looked calm. I looked powerful. I looked like a woman who had just been handed the keys to her enemy's destruction. I pressed the intercom button. Sarah, send in the finance team. And bring me a fresh coffee. It is going to be a wonderful day. The drive back to my estate that evening felt different. Usually the winding roads of Buckhead were a decompression zone where I let go of the stress of the boardroom, but tonight, I was not decompressing. I was getting into character. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I had intentionally rubbed off some of my mascara to create dark smudges under my eyes. I had let my hair fall a bit loose, ruining the perfect blowout I usually maintained. I needed to look like a woman who had been broken. I needed to look like a CEO who had finally hit a wall she could not climb over. When I pulled into the driveway, the sight that greeted me was predictable, but still infuriating. The lights in the main house were blazing. My electricity bill was going to be astronomical, but I reminded myself that it was a small price to pay for the entrapment I was orchestrating. I walked through the front door, my shoulders slumped forward in a posture of defeat. They were in the living room just as I expected. But the mood had shifted. They were no longer the desperate squatters of the first night, or the angry mob of the pool party. They were celebrating. Gavin was holding a crystal tumbler filled with my 30-year-old scotch. LaToya was flipping through a magazine, her feet resting on the coffee table. My parents were watching an oversized television, looking relaxed and comfortable. The moment I entered the room, the conversation stopped. Gavin looked up, a smug grin spreading across his face. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, looking at me with the eyes of a predator who sees a wounded gazelle. "Well, look who decided to come home," Gavin said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Did you get the delivery from my lawyer today, Dominique? Mr. Thorne said he served you personally." I let out a long, shaky sigh. I dropped my Birkin bag onto the floor with a heavy thud, a gesture of surrender that I knew they would interpret as weakness. I walked over to the armchair opposite them and collapsed into it, burying my face in my hands. "You win," I whispered. My voice was hoarse, just loud enough for them to hear. The silence in the room was electric. I could feel them exchanging glances. They were checking to see if this was real. "What did you say?" LaToya asked, sitting up straighter. "I said you win," I repeated, lifting my head to look at them with tear-filled eyes. "I cannot do this anymore. The lawsuit, the press suit, the social media attacks. My investors are panicking. The stock dropped another 4% today because of the rumors about me abusing our parents. I spent 10 years building this company, and I cannot let it be destroyed by a family feud." Gavin let out a loud, barking laugh. He slapped his knee, turning to my father. "I told you, Desmond. I told you she would fold. These corporate types are all the same. They act tough, but the moment you threaten their reputation, they crumble." My father nodded sagely, looking at me with a mixture of pity and triumph. "We did not want to take it to court, Dominique," he said, his voice taking on that familiar, self-righteous tone. "We just wanted what was fair. We wanted you to honor your obligations." I took a deep breath, wiping the fake tears from my cheeks. "I know, Dad. I see that now. I was being stubborn. I was holding on to old grudges when I should have been stepping up as the leader of this family." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a notepad. I saw Gavin's eyes lock onto it. "So here's what I'm going to do," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I spoke with my lawyers. We are drafting a settlement agreement. I am going to agree to the terms of your lawsuit." Gavin practically jumped out of his seat. Everything he asked, breathless. Everything I confirmed. "I will pay off the debts. I will clear the gambling losses so you have a clean slate. I will agree to the monthly stipend of $15,000 for Mom and Dad. And I will sign over rights for you to reside in the guest house permanently with full access to the main property." LaToya squealed. It was a high-pitched sound of pure greed. She looked at Gavin, her eyes wide. "We are going to be rich," she whispered, not even trying to hide it. But I added, holding up a hand, "There is one condition." Gavin's face darkened instantly. "What condition?" "It is about my image," I lied smoothly. "My board of directors is furious. They think I am a monster who hates her family. If I just pay you off quietly, the rumors will not stop. People will think I just bought your silence. I need to show the world that we have actually reconciled. I need to show them that we are a united, loving family again." And how do you propose we do that? My mother asked, her eyes narrowing. This Saturday is the 10th anniversary gala for Dom Logistics, I explained. It is the biggest night of my career. The mayor will be there. The press will be there. Investors from all over the world are flying in. It is a black tie event at the Ritz-Carlton. I paused, watching the words sink in. Black tie. Ritz-Carlton. Press. I saw Latoya's vanity waking up. I want you all to come as my guests of honor, I continued. I want to bring you up on stage. I want to publicly present the check to clear your debts and sign the deed for the housing trust in front of the cameras. I want to make a speech about how family is the most important thing in the world. If we do that, the stock price will recover and my reputation will be saved. Latoya was already mentally going through her wardrobe. Wait, she said. You want us on stage? In front of the cameras? Like on the news? Yes, I said. I want everyone to see how generous I am being. And I want everyone to see that you have forgiven me. Gavin scratched his chin. He was doing the math. He realized that a public signing was even better than a private one. It meant I could not back out. It meant he would be famous. He would be the man who brought the great Dominique Williams to her knees. We need outfits, he said abruptly. We lost most of our good clothes when we moved. I pulled a company credit card from my wallet and slid it across the coffee table. Buy whatever you need, I said. Get tuxedos. Get gowns. Get hair and makeup. I want you to look like $1 million, because on Saturday you will be. Gavin snatched the card before it even stopped sliding. He held it up to the light, grinning like a shark. All right, Dominique, he said. You have got a deal. We will play your little game. We will come to your party. We will smile for the cameras. And then we will take the check. Thank you, I whispered, standing up. I felt a wave of nausea, not from fear, but from the sheer toxicity of their presence. I really appreciate this. I am going to go to the guest house and sleep. I have a lot of paperwork to prepare for Saturday. I walked out of the room, leaving them to their victory. As I closed the front door, I heard them cheering. I heard the sound of another bottle of scotch being opened. They were high on the dopamine of conquest. They thought they had bullied me into submission. They thought I was worried about stock prices and PR. They did not understand that in the world of logistics, you sometimes have to route a shipment through a dangerous path to get it to its final destination. I was not surrendering. I was positioning them. I walked across the lawn to the guest house, the night air cooling the sweat on my neck. The mask dropped the moment I was alone. My posture straightened. The tears dried up. A cold, hard smile touched my lips. They wanted to be on stage. Fine. I would give them a stage. They wanted the press. Perfect. I had already ensured that the best investigative journalists in Atlanta would be in the front row. They wanted me to sign papers regarding their debts. Oh, I would sign papers, all right. But they were not the papers they were expecting. I entered my office and sat down at the computer. I opened the folder labeled Gala Presentation. I deleted the slide that said Company Growth and replaced it with the file named Gavin Miller Forensic Audit. I spent the next hour curating the playlist for their destruction. I synced the video of Latoya signing the fraudulent loan documents with the audio of Gavin admitting he wanted to put me in a mental institution. I arranged the bank statements showing the crypto gambling losses to appear right at the moment the music would swell. It was going to be a beautiful evening. Gavin thought he was walking onto a stage to receive a crown. He did not know he was walking onto a scaffold, and as I looked at the black card they were currently using to buy expensive suits, I laughed. Let them buy the best tuxedos in town. After all, everyone should look their best for their own funeral. I turned off the screen. Saturday was 3 days away. 3 days of letting them think they were kings. 3 days to let their guard down completely. I am coming for you, I whispered into the darkness. And this time, the whole world is going to watch you fall. The morning of the 10th anniversary gala arrived with a sky the color of bruised slate, a fitting backdrop for the funeral of my family's reputation. I had left the main house early, claiming I had urgent press briefings at the Ritz-Carlton. In reality, I was sitting in the back of my Maybach parked just down the street, watching the live feed from the hidden cameras inside my master suite. I had set the stage perfectly. I had instructed the house staff to leave the master dressing room unlocked for the cleaning crew. I had even left the code to the Jewelry Island display case written on a sticky note tucked under a perfume bottle. A careless mistake that the Dominique of yesterday would never make, but the broken, defeated Dominique they thought they had conquered might. It did not take long for the rats to find the cheese. At 10 in the morning, the heavy double doors of my dressing room creaked open. Gavin walked in first, holding a half-empty mimosa. He was wearing nothing but his boxer shorts and a silk robe he had stolen from the guest bathroom. LaToya followed him, her eyes wide as saucers as she took in the room. My dressing room was not just a closet. It was a 1,200-square-foot sanctuary of fashion lined with backlit glass cabinets, velvet islands, and floor-to-ceiling mirrors. It smelled of cedar and expensive leather. "Holy hell," Gavin whispered, his voice tinny through the audio feed. "Look at this place. This is bigger than our entire apartment was." He ran his hand along a row of my blazers, his greasy fingers touching the virgin wool of a Balmain jacket. He pulled it off the hanger, slipping his arms into it. It was too tight in the shoulders, straining against his bulk, but he posed in front of the mirror anyway, flexing his non-existent muscles. "I look like a boss in this," he announced, turning to LaToya. "This is what power looks like, babe." LaToya was not listening. She had made a beeline for the shoe wall. She was caressing a pair of crystal-embellished Jimmy Choos. Her face twisted in a mix of lust and hatred. "She has so many," LaToya muttered. "She cannot even wear all these. It is hoarding, really. It is sick. While we were struggling to pay rent, she was buying shoes that cost $2,000 a pair. She owes us this, Gavin. She owes us all of this." "Take what you want," Gavin said, wandering over to the center island, where I kept my watch collection. "It is all going to be ours anyway. Once we sign those papers tonight, community property laws kick in or whatever. We are just getting an advance on our inheritance." I watched as Gavin looked down at the glass case. He saw the sticky note. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. He punched in the 4-digit code. The lock clicked open with a soft hiss of hydraulics. Inside sat 6 watches on velvet pillows. Rolex, Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe. Gavin let out a low whistle. He reached in and picked up the Patek Philippe Nautilus. It was a rose gold timepiece worth $120,000. I had bought it to celebrate my first government contract. "Now this," Gavin said, strapping it onto his wrist. "This says I have arrived." He held his wrist up to the light, admiring the way the diamonds on the bezel caught the reflection of the chandelier. "Do you think she will notice?" LaToya asked, looking up from a tray of diamond earrings. "Who cares if she notices?" Gavin scoffed. "What is she going to do?" "Call the police on the night of her big gala." "She is terrified of bad press, remember? She is weak, Toya. She is broken. I saw it in her eyes last night. She is desperate for us to love her. She will let us get away with anything just to keep us smiling for the cameras." LaToya nodded, emboldened by his confidence. She picked up a diamond tennis necklace, a cascade of platinum and ice that I had planned to wear that very evening. She fastened it around her neck, preening in the mirror. "It looks better on me," she decided. "Dominique is too skinny. She does not have the neck for this. I make it look expensive." I sat in my car, my hands clenched so tight around the tablet that my knuckles were white. They were not just stealing. They were dissecting me. They were stripping away my achievements and draping them over their own failures, convincing themselves that they were the ones who deserved the glory. But then the conversation took a turn that made my blood run cold. Gavin leaned back against the island, admiring the watch. "You know," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "we should not stop at the guest house." "What do you mean?" LaToya asked, still mesmerized by her reflection. "I mean, once she signs that settlement tonight, she admits legal liability for our financial state," Gavin explained. "That gives us leverage. And I have been reading up on the competency laws in Georgia. I leaned closer to the screen. This was it. If she is admitting she was negligent, and if she is showing signs of emotional instability, crying, giving away her fortune, acting erratic, we could make a case. Gavin continued, a cruel grin twisting his lips. We could petition the court for a conservatorship. We could say she is having a mental breakdown. LaToya turned to face him, her eyes gleaming. You mean like Britney Spears? She asked. Exactly like Britney. Gavin laughed. We get a doctor to testify she is unfit to run the company. Too much stress, too much guilt. We step in as her legal guardians. We take control of Dom logistics. We put her in a nice, quiet facility where she can rest. Maybe for a long, long time. And then we get everything, LaToya whispered. The house, the company, the accounts, everything. Gavin confirmed. We tiff her off to the loony bin, and we move into the master suite for real. No more asking permission. We will be the ones writing her allowance checks. I froze. The air in the car suddenly felt thin. I had expected greed. I had expected theft. But I had not expected this level of malevolence. They were not just planning to leech off me. They were plotting to imprison me. They were planning to use the legal system to strip me of my autonomy, to lock me away in a mental institution so they could consume the carcass of my life's work. Gavin walked over to LaToya and kissed her on the forehead. Tonight is just step one, babe, he said. Wear the necklace. Wear the earrings. Let us look like the royalty we are. By this time next year, Dominique will be weaving baskets in a sanitarium, and we will be running Atlanta. LaToya giggled, a sound that was pure poison. You are a genius, Gavin, she said. I always knew you were the smart one. I reached out and stopped the recording. I saved the clip to 3 different secure servers. I emailed a copy to my lawyer Sterling Vance with the subject line "Evidence for criminal conspiracy and attempted kidnapping." I sat back against the leather seat of the Maybach, watching the rain begin to streak the windows. A strange sense of calm settled over me. Before this moment I had felt a twinge of guilt. A tiny nagging voice that asked if I was being too harsh. After all, they were family. Maybe I should just pay their debts and send them away. But that voice was dead now. Gavin had killed it. They wanted to put me in a cage. They wanted to gaslight the world into thinking I was insane so they could steal my empire. I looked at the time. It was 11 in the morning. The gala started at 7. I picked up my phone and called my head of security. Marcus, I said. Yes, Ms. Williams. They are in the dressing room. They have taken the Patek and the diamond tennis necklace. Do not stop them. Let them wear it. Are you sure, ma'am? Marcus asked, sounding confused. That is $250,000 in jewelry. I am sure, I said. Let them walk out of the house with it. Let them wear it to the Ritz-Carlton. I want them to be wearing the stolen property when the police put the handcuffs on. It makes the theft charge irrefutable. And Marcus, yes, make sure the camera crew at the event gets a close-up of that watch on Gavin's wrist. I want the jury to see exactly how good it looked on him before he traded it for handcuffs. I hung up. I looked at the image of them one last time on the frozen screen. They were hugging, celebrating their brilliant plan to destroy me. They looked so happy, so triumphant. Enjoy the jewelry, I whispered. It is the severance package for your freedom. I tapped the partition glass. Driver, I said, take me to the venue. I have a speech to rewrite. As the car pulled away, I felt lighter than I had in 10 years. The sister who craved their love was gone. The victim was gone. The only thing left was the CEO. And I was about to execute the most hostile takeover in family history. The ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Atlanta was transformed into a galaxy of crystal and gold. I stood on the VIP balcony, overlooking the floor, a flute of mineral water in my hand, watching the culmination of a decade of blood, sweat, and tears. There were 500 guests below me. I saw the mayor of Atlanta shaking hands with my chief financial officer. I saw the CEO of a major pharmaceutical partner laughing with my head of operations. These were the titans of industry, the people who moved the economy, and tonight they were here to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of Dom Logistics. But as I looked down at the sea of tuxedos and designer gowns, my eyes were not searching for business partners. I was looking for the circus, and right on cue, the clowns arrived. The double doors at the main entrance swung open and my family stepped through them, as if they were royalty greeting their subjects. They had certainly taken my credit card seriously. My father Desmond was wearing a custom velvet tuxedo jacket that probably cost more than his first car. My mother Betty was draped in a gold sequined gown that was a little too tight and a little too flashy for a corporate event, but she wore it with an air of unearned haughtiness. But it was Gavin and Latoya who drew my gaze and held it. Gavin walked with a swagger that was almost comical. He had slicked his hair back and his tuxedo was sharp, but it was the accessory on his left wrist that made my heart beat faster with anticipation. The rose-gold Patek Philippe Nautilus caught the light from the chandeliers, sending fractals of light dancing across the room. He made a show of checking the time, constantly pulling up his cuff so everyone could see the $120,000 stolen watch. Latoya was beside him, clinging to his arm like a trophy wife. She was wearing the diamond tennis necklace. The platinum and stones rested against her skin, a glittering noose of evidence that she had placed around her own neck. She looked radiant, I had to admit. Happiness looks good on everyone, even if that happiness is fueled by theft and delusion. I adjusted the microphone pack clipped to the back of my dress. It was time to go down and play my part. I descended the grand staircase, my silver gown flowing behind me like liquid mercury. As I reached the bottom step, the room grew quieter, heads turning to acknowledge the woman of the hour. But before I could greet my board members, my mother intercepted me. She did not hug me. She did not tell me I looked beautiful. She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a group of people I recognized as the editorial board of the Atlanta Business Chronicle. "Here she is," my mother announced, her voice shrill with pride. "My baby girl. You know, everyone asks me how Dominique became such a shark in business. And I always tell them it is all about the upbringing. Desmond and I ran a tight ship. We taught her the value of $1 before she could walk." I forced a smile, looking at the journalists who were politely nodding. The value of $1. This from the woman who had cut me off when I was eating ramen noodles in a dorm room. "Is that so?" one of the editors asked, looking at me. "Your parents were your mentors then?" "Oh, absolutely," my father chimed in, stepping forward to swirl his scotch. "I always told her, Dominique, if you want to lead, you have to follow first." I was hard on her, sure. But look at the result. We molded her. This company is really a testament to the Williams family values. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. They were stealing my story. They were standing there in front of the people who documented my career and claiming authorship of my success. They were rewriting the nights I slept in my office. They were erasing the years of isolation. They were painting a portrait of a supportive, nurturing home that never existed. "You are so right, Dad," I said, my voice sweet as poisoned honey. "I certainly learned a lot from you." My father beamed, mistaking my sarcasm for submission. He patted my shoulder, his heavy hand feeling like a burden I was about to shed forever. Just then I saw Gavin making his rounds. He was moving through the crowd with a stack of fresh business cards he must have printed at a same-day shop. I watched him approach Mr. Henderson, a conservative banker who had been skeptical of my expansion plans initially, but was now one of my staunchest allies. Gavin clapped Mr. Henderson on the back as if they were old fraternity brothers. I excused myself from my parents and moved closer, needing to hear this. "Gavin Miller," I heard him say, thrusting a card into Henderson's hand, "Senior Strategic Advisor to the CEO. I am the one who really steers the ship behind the scenes. Dominique is the face, you know, great girl, but she gets emotional. I handle the hard numbers." Mr. Henderson looked at the card, then at Gavin, then at the stolen watch on Gavin's wrist. He looked confused. "I was not aware Ms. Williams had a senior advisor," Henderson said dryly. "Well, it is a new role," Gavin winked. "Part of the restructuring. We are going to be making some big changes. Moving into crypto markets, diversifying the portfolio. You and I should grab lunch. I can show you where the real money is. I stepped into the circle, my smile fixed in place. Hello, Mr. Henderson, I said. I see you have met my brother-in-law. Henderson looked at me with relief. Dominique. Yes. He was just telling me about his vision for the company, crypto markets. I laughed, a light tinkling sound that echoed the champagne glasses. Oh, Gavin loves to joke, I said, patting Gavin's arm. He is quite the storyteller. Gavin's smile faltered for a second, but he recovered quickly, leaning in to whisper in my ear. Don't undermine me, Dom. Remember the agreement. I am the advisor now. Play along, or the deal is off. I looked at him. I looked at the grease from the hors d'oeuvres on his fingers staining my arm. Of course, Gavin, I whispered back. I wouldn't dream of ruining your big night. He smirked and moved on to his next victim, a venture capitalist from Silicon Valley. I watched him go, marveling at the sheer density of his ego. He truly believed it. He believed that he could walk into a room of self-made millionaires and fool them with a cheap suit and a stolen watch. He didn't understand that these people spoke a language of competence that he had never learned. I felt a hand on my back. It was LaToya. Great party, sis, she said, her mouth full of lobster. The shrimp is a little rubbery, but the venue is okay. She touched the diamond necklace at her throat, making sure it caught the light. I think I am going to keep this, she said, not asking, but telling. It suits me better than you. You always wear such boring jewelry. This needs a woman with curves to pull it off. It looks stunning on you, LaToya, I said honestly. It really completes the outfit. She preened, looking around the room. So, when do we go on stage? She asked. I want to get the signing over with. My feet hurt in these heels. And I want to announce my new position. Your new position? I asked. Yeah, she said. I was thinking vice president of human resources. I am good with people, and I can fire the ones who look at me wrong. I looked at my sister. She was fantasizing about firing my employees before she had even been hired. She was a caricature of a villain so lacking in self-awareness that it was almost tragic. Soon, LaToya, I promised. The presentation starts in 10 minutes. Just make sure you and Gavin and Mom and Dad are right in the front row. I want you to have the best view in the house. Oh, we will be there, she said. Don't worry, we aren't going to miss our coronation. She waddled off toward the bar, signaling for another glass of champagne. I stood alone for a moment in the center of the whirlwind. The air felt charged with electricity. I looked at my parents, who were now taking selfies with the mayor, probably telling him how they taught me to network. I looked at Gavin, who was cornering a terrified waitress to brag about his watch. I looked at LaToya, who was critiquing the decor to anyone who would listen. They were drunk on power. They were high on the illusion of control. They thought they had successfully invaded my world and claimed it as their own. I signaled to the production manager in the booth above. He gave me a thumbs up. The lights in the ballroom began to dim. The music shifted from a gentle string quartet to a dramatic orchestral swell. A spotlight hit the center of the stage. It was time. I walked toward the stage, my heart beating a steady rhythm of justice. They wanted to be seen. They wanted to be acknowledged. Tonight I would give them exactly what they wanted. I would make sure every single person in this room and every person watching the live stream knew exactly who the Williams family was. I stepped up to the microphone, the silence of the room wrapping around me like a shield. Welcome, everyone, I said, my voice booming through the speakers. Thank you for celebrating 10 years of Dom Logistics. But before we talk about the future, we have to talk about the past. And we have to talk about the people who made me who I am today. I gestured to the front row where my family sat, beaming their teeth white, their stolen jewelry sparkling. Please, I said, give a round of applause for my family. The room clapped politely. Gavin stood up and waved. LaToya blew a kiss. They had no idea that the applause was the last pleasant sound they would hear for a very, very long time. Thank you, I continued, gripping the podium. Family is a complicated word. For some it means support. For others it means sacrifice. And for a select few, it means something entirely different. Tonight, I want to be completely transparent with all of my partners and investors. I want you to see the real foundation of this company. I want you to see the truth that has been hidden for too long. I pressed the clicker in my hand. The massive LED screen behind me, which was 20 feet tall and 40 feet wide, flickered to life. Gavin leaned forward in his seat, expecting to see a slide about profits or perhaps a photo of him looking important. Instead, the screen showed a document. It was blown up to massive proportions, every line crisp and legible. It was the second mortgage agreement on my parents' home. The room went quiet. I could hear the confusion rippling through the crowd. This, I narrated calmly, is the document that cost my parents their home. You will notice the date, 6 months ago. You will notice the amount, $300,000. I clicked the button again. The screen changed to a flowchart of bank transactions. The lines were red, tracing the money from the bank to a shell company to a crypto exchange. And this is where the retirement savings of Desmond and Betty Williams went. It was not the economy. It was not inflation. It was a gambling addiction funded by fraud. I looked down at the front row. My father had stopped smiling. His mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water. Gavin had frozen his hand halfway to his glass. But I was just getting started. Some of you may have seen the news reports this week, I said, my voice cutting through the rising murmur. Reports that I have abandoned my family, that I am mentally unstable, that I require a conservatorship. I clicked the button. The screen went black for a second, then lit up with the high-definition footage from my dressing room. It was the video from earlier that morning. The audio was crystal clear, amplified by the concert-grade speakers of the ballroom. Gavin's voice boomed out, filling the cavernous space. We could petition the court for a conservatorship. We could say she is having a mental breakdown. We get a doctor to testify she is unfit. We put her in a nice, quiet facility where she can rest. Maybe for a long, long time. The gasp from the audience sucked the air out of the room. It was a collective sound of horror. 500 of the most powerful people in Atlanta watched as Gavin and LaToya plotted to kidnap me and steal my company. I saw Mr. Henderson cover his mouth. I saw the mayor shake his head in disgust. On the screen, LaToya giggled. You are a genius, Gavin. I paused the video on the frame where they were hugging, celebrating their crime. I looked down at them. Gavin was no longer sitting. He was trying to stand up, but his legs seemed to have failed him. He looked like a man who had just been shot. LaToya was clawing at her neck as if the diamond necklace was suddenly choking her. I am not having a mental breakdown, I said, my voice icy. And I am not unfit, but I am a CEO who protects her assets. And right now I am looking at 2 individuals who are wearing company property. I pointed a finger directly at Gavin. The spotlight followed my hand, landing squarely on him. That watch on Gavin Miller's wrist. It is a Patek Philippe Nautilus. It was removed from my private safe without permission this morning. I pointed at LaToya. And that necklace, a diamond tennis chain, also removed without permission. The room erupted. It was no longer a gala, it was a crime scene. I saw the security team moving in from the sides of the room. They were not my private security this time. They were uniformed Atlanta police officers. You wanted to be famous, Gavin, I said into the microphone. You wanted everyone to know who you are. Well, now they do. You are not a senior advisor. You are a thief. You are a con artist who scammed the elderly, and you are a conspirator in a plot to imprison a corporate executive. Gavin looked around wildly. He saw the doors blocked by police. He saw the disgusted faces of the investors he had tried to impress. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw the arrogance completely vanish, replaced by the terrified realization that he was small and I was a giant. Dominique, wait! He shouted, his voice cracking. It was a joke. We were just joking. I clicked the remote one last time. The screen went black, leaving only the Dom Logistics logo burning in white. The joke is over, I said. Officers, please escort my guests to their new accommodations. I believe they have a reservation at the Fulton County Jail. As the police moved in, handcuffing Gavin in his stolen tuxedo and LaToya in her stolen diamonds, the ballroom remained silent for a heartbeat. And then slowly someone started to clap. It was Mr. Henderson. Then the mayor joined in. Then the whole room rose to their feet. It was a standing ovation. Not for the company, not for the anniversary, but for the truth. I watched as my family was dragged out the side exit, kicking and screaming, their cries drowned out by the thunderous applause of my peers. I took a sip of my water. It tasted like victory. The red wedding of reputation was complete, and I was the last woman standing. The applause died down, replaced by a silence so heavy it felt like it could crush the breath out of my lungs. The police officers stood at the edge of the stage waiting for my signal, but I was not finished yet. I had dealt with the thief and the conspirator, but I had not yet addressed the enablers. I turned my gaze to the front row where my parents, Desmond and Betty, sat frozen in their seats. They looked small under the harsh stage lights, stripped of the arrogance they had walked in with. They were watching Gavin being held by the officers, and they were watching LaToya trembling in her stolen diamonds, but mostly, they were watching me. I could see the terror in their eyes, not for their children, but for themselves. They were wondering if they were next. They were wondering if they were about to be arrested for their part in the charade. I reached into the podium and pulled out one final document. It was bound in a bright red folder, the color of a warning sign. I walked to the edge of the stage, my heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor, until I was standing directly above them. I did not need the microphone anymore. The room was so quiet that a whisper would have carried to the back rows. Dad. I said, my voice soft, but carrying the weight of a gavel. You told everyone tonight that you taught me the value of $1. You told the press that you molded me. Well, you were right. You taught me that money is the only language this family understands, so let us speak that language one last time. I opened the red folder. You told me you lost your home on Oak Street to the bank. I continued, holding the paper up so they could see the deed. You lied. You lost it to a shell company that bought the debt 3 months ago. That company is called Dom Holdings. I am the bank. I have been the owner of the house you raised me in for 90 days. My mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. My father slumped in his chair, his face turning the color of ash. They realized that while they were plotting to take my new house, I had already conquered their old one. I looked at the document and then back at them. I have every legal right to evict you, I said. I could throw your furniture on the lawn tomorrow morning. I could sell the property to a developer who would bulldoze it to the ground. And honestly, after what you tried to do to me tonight, that is exactly what you deserve. I paused, letting the threat hang in the air. I saw my mother begin to weep silently. She was imagining the homeless shelter. She was imagining the humiliation of her friends at church finding out she was destitute. But I am not you, I said, my voice hardening. I do not throw family out on the street, so I am going to make you an offer that will save you from the homeless shelter you are so afraid of. I pulled a pen from my pocket and held it out along with the folder. I am transferring the deed of the Oak Street house back to you, I announced. It will be fully paid off. No mortgage, no debt. You can live there for the rest of your lives in peace and security. You will have your home back. My father's eyes lit up with a desperate hope. He reached for the folder, his hand shaking. Thank you, Dominique, he stammered. Thank you, baby. I knew you had a good heart. I pulled the folder back just an inch out of his reach. I am not finished, I said sharply. There is a condition, a legally binding clause that is written into this deed. If you violate it, the property immediately reverts to me, and you will be evicted within 24 hours. What is it? My father asked, his eyes darting to the paper. anything. We will do anything. I pointed to the clause at the bottom of the page. The condition is simple, I said. This house is for Desmond and Betty Williams only. It is a sanctuary for you. It is not a shelter for criminals. The contract states that LaToya and Gavin are permanently banned from the premises. They cannot live there. They cannot visit there. They cannot step foot within 500 feet of the property line. If you let them in for a single night, if you give them a single meal under that roof, you lose the house forever. The room gasped again. I was forcing them to make the ultimate choice. I was making them choose between their survival and their golden child. For 30 years they had sacrificed me to protect LaToya. They had given her everything while I scraped for crumbs. Now I was putting a price on that loyalty. I looked at LaToya, who was standing near the police officers. She had stopped crying. She was staring at our parents, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Mom!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "You cannot sign that! Where am I going to go? Gavin is going to jail. I have no money. I have nowhere to live. You cannot choose a house over your own daughter." I looked at my mother. This was the woman who had watched me limp on a broken leg and told me to figure it out. This was the woman who had looked the other way when LaToya bullied me. I waited to see if a mother's love was stronger than a coward's greed. My mother looked at LaToya. She looked at the diamond necklace that was about to be stripped from her daughter's neck as evidence. Then she looked at the folder in my hand. She looked at the promise of a warm bed and a roof over her head. I watched the calculation happen in real time behind her eyes. It was cold, it was practical, and it was devastating. "Give me the pen," my mother whispered. "What?" LaToya shrieked. "Mom, no." My father did not even look at LaToya. He snatched the pen from my hand. He signed his name on the line with a speed that was almost violent. My mother signed right next to him. They did not hesitate. They did not apologize. When faced with the prospect of losing their own comfort, they discarded their favorite child like a used wrapper. I took the folder back, checking the signatures. They were valid. "Congratulations," I said, handing them the keys to their old life. "You have your home, and you have your freedom from the people who destroyed it." My father clutched the keys to his chest, refusing to look at the weeping woman standing 10 feet away. "Officers," I said, turning to the police, "please remove the trespassers." The scene that followed was a masterclass in human nature. The police moved in on Gavin first. He tried to struggle, screaming that he was a victim, but the officer simply twisted his arm behind his back. The light caught the rose-gold Patek Philippe one last time before the metal handcuffs clicked shut around it. "That watch is evidence, son," the officer said. "You are going away for a long time. Grand larceny, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, fraud. Hope you enjoyed the party because it is the last one you will see for 10 years. Then they turned to LaToya. She was not in handcuffs yet, but she was in a prison of her own making. She looked at our parents, pleading with them one last time. "Dad, please," she begged. "Do not let them take me. Where am I supposed to sleep tonight?" My father turned his back on her. He adjusted his velvet jacket and picked up his drink, looking toward the exit. "You heard your sister, LaToya," he said, his voice trembling but firm. "We cannot lose the house. You are a grown woman. You made your bed. Now you have to lie in it." The sound that came out of LaToya was primal. It was the sound of a worldview shattering. She realized in that moment that she was never truly loved. She was only enabled. And now that the enabling had a cost, she was worthless to them. I watched from the stage as she was escorted out. She was still wearing my diamond necklace, but it no longer looked like jewelry. It looked like a chain. She was sobbing hysterically, screaming curses at the parents who had created her and the sister who had finally defeated her. The ballroom doors closed behind them, cutting off her screams. I looked down at my parents. They were standing alone in the middle of the crowd, holding their keys. The guests around them were looking at them with open disgust. They had their house, But they had lost their dignity. They would go back to their old home, but they would die alone knowing that they had sold their children for comfort. I stepped away from the podium. The show was over. I walked down the stairs past the investors who were looking at me with a new level of respect. I did not stop to celebrate. I did not stop to explain. I walked straight out the front doors of the Ritz-Carlton into the cool night air. My driver was waiting with the door open. I slid into the back seat of the Bentley, the leather cool against my skin. The silence of the car was a luxury I had never appreciated more. I looked down at the passenger seat where I had tossed my earrings earlier. I reached up and unclasped the heavy diamond necklace I was wearing, the one that matched the stolen one LaToya had just worn to her doom. I let it drop onto the seat beside me. It was just a rock. Cold, hard carbon. It meant nothing compared to the weight that had just been lifted off my shoulders. I pulled out my phone. I dialed my assistant's number. "It is done," I said. "Did they sign?" Sarah asked. "They signed?" I replied, looking out the window as the city lights blurred by. "They chose the house. LaToya is on her own." "Understood," Sarah said. "And the gate codes?" "Change them," I said. "Change every code. Change the locks. Delete their biometrics from the system. And notify security that if any vehicle registered to the name Williams approaches the perimeter, they are to engage the bollards immediately. Copy that, Dominique. Are you coming home?" I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the headrest. "Yes," I said. "I am coming home. To my house. My sanctuary." I hung up the phone. I thought about the gate. For 10 years it had been a symbol of my exclusion. Then it became a symbol of my protection. Tonight it was finally just a gate. It was a barrier that I controlled. I had opened it to let the truth in, and now I was closing it to keep the toxicity out. I watched the skyline of Atlanta fade into the distance. I was alone in the car, but I did not feel lonely. I felt clean. I had cut the rot out of my life with the precision of a surgeon. It had been painful and it had been expensive, but as the car turned onto the highway taking me toward a future that belonged only to me, I knew it was worth every penny. The bill was paid, the debt was settled, and for the first time in my life, I was truly free. This journey taught me that sharing DNA does not make you family. Loyalty and respect do. For years, I sought their validation only to realize my worth was never up for negotiation. True freedom isn't just about financial success. It is about the courage to set absolute boundaries with those who only value you for what they can take. I broke the cycle of abuse by closing the gate on toxicity and opening the door to my own peace. Sometimes you have to lose the people who hold you back to find the person you are meant to be. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of resilience. Have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save your sanity? Share your experience in the comments below.